Welcome to the fifth session where we are using Indian knowledge systems for creating a global well-being curriculum. In this session, we will see Indian knowledge systems' second way of knowing, Anuman, and will judge the need for using the third way of knowing, Upaman. What is the inference by practitioners? We will compare knowledge systems of the current and the Indian, both. We will ask and study why social pain has been created despite using the current knowledge system, and why the need of a comparison with an alternate knowledge system is required now. And we will also study some concepts of Indian knowledge system. In the last session, we saw that the goal of education has changed from prosperity to well-being. Let us take an example from your life. Has your defeat given someone else great glee? Did he or she taunt you over the failure and made you feel small in front of everybody? If this happened sometime in your life, what was your reaction? Did you ever resolve never to enjoy someone else's defeat in that manner? Write about it. If you've never faced such a situation, write down your likely reaction in case it occurs. Let us look at the last lecture's evidence. What may be the inferences? The wealthiest economies in the world, members of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, discovered that despite the prosperity caused by spread of education and technology in the last 150 years, a lot of social pain was created. It now wants education to create progress without social pain. Maybe it is worthwhile to draw inferences about what may have created social pain, despite all efforts to include ethics in the curriculum of CKS, the current knowledge system. What did the practitioners say after the 2008 recession? What inferences and plan of action did they want? Have we fulfilled their ideas? In the next lectures, we will see if IKS can do that. In this lecture, we will see what was the inference by practitioners after the 2008 recession. This will be the first part of this lecture. How did the sources of knowledge change? Especially, did perception change after the testimony of 2008? So, what is the comparison done in this lecture between current knowledge systems and Indian knowledge systems? In the current knowledge system, sense perception is the first way of knowing. We analyze the four sources of knowledge used by current knowledge systems here and see if they are sufficient. For Indian knowledge system, it uses sense perception, but each individual must explore the source of sense perception to validate if the source of knowledge is reliable. Indian knowledge systems investigate the source of what is to be investigated, and that is knowledge. The current knowledge system starts with perception and uses sense perception as a source that creates knowledge. Quantum physics finds that reality of the universe to be outside the capacity of measurement of sense perception. Sense perception is used by the Indian knowledge system, but it seeks its source to find the answers. Will quantum reality of creation be the source of knowledge? It asks. But first, we'll see about current knowledge systems. How are the four sources of knowledge and justification of current knowledge systems used by academia? What were the conclusions after 2008? What was the plan of action recommended, and was the plan fully implemented? The idea of knowledge in the human context is linked to an education system, for even animals have knowledge for survival and self-protection. The Stanford Encyclopedia traces the Greek root of the word epistemology as implying knowledge, understanding, reason, etc. It identifies the four sources of knowledge and justification as perception, introspection, memory, reason, testimony. We can already see that introspection has been added here. It is not included in the 8 ways of knowing of the IB curriculum. Introspection can transform reason as it seeks to know whether the instrument to judge testimony is faulty or not. Let us view perception as a source of knowledge. Will the instrument of perception impact reality? What does quantum physics say about this? Is quantum reality a particle or a wave? Is there a role of observer of reality? If the reading of the instrument changes, will it be reliable? If the mind is used as the instrument, what if the state of mind has changed between two readings? This is an irrelevant question for a sense perception based view. But ask this question to an investigator of reality, a quantum physicist, and a different answer may be given. An observer of reality is open to the idea of the role of observer in perception of reality of quantum physics, the truth of reality of the universe. Is the mind an observer or is it a participant? What is the lens that makes the same phenomena of reality appear as a wave or at some times as a particle? The reality is the same, the perception changes. Let's look at testimony as a source of knowledge. In the current knowledge system, it's depending on others, what they say, and Indian knowledge system's way is to investigate oneself also. We tend to believe what others say. What if they are wrong? Professor Lackey states that a widely held view in the epistemology of testimony is that belief is the center of testimonial exchange and quotes Michael Wellborn for this. IB's theory of knowledge also has belief as a way of knowing. What is the basis of belief? What if its basis is false? We see in history that Galileo was accused of heresy when he proved that the earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around. It took 300 years to change this belief. At that time, considering the earth as the center of the universe was the scientific view because it suited our sense perception. Are we today falling in the trap of sense perception by denying the quantum reality that is well investigated but is not considered as the basis of daily life? Professor Nicholas Smith states, and I quote, "Much of what we regard ourselves as knowing came to us from the testimony of others." But recently, epistemologists have debated just how testimony can be a source of knowledge at all. Unquote. He further states, and I quote, "Is the testimony of others really very reliable? At first glance, it does not seem like it." Unquote. Self-confidence comes through direct experience of the truth. Will it come by personal investigation? Education in the Indian knowledge system gives self-confidence that emerges from direct experience of the truth. When we have climbed a tree to pluck a fruit, we know we can feed our hunger. Do we examine testimony and use it only when it is convenient? Suppose we ask science that investigates reality to give us testimony of their results that are scientifically validated. Would we be ready to accept this testimony in our daily life? If not, are we not reverting to a phenomena that we only take that which is convenient to be the truth? The testimony of quantum physicists states that the table and chair are not what they seem. Yet we follow our sense perception, ignoring this interpretation of reality. If our sense perception was as strong as the instruments of physicists, would our behavior be different? Quantum physics may not be denying the reality of the world, but it does say that it is reasonable to ask the question, is reality an illusion? Indian knowledge systems too does not deny the reality of the world. It does ask us to explore deeply and answer self-confidently through direct experience the result of our search. Are we using the wrong instruments to decide what reality is? Is our behavior then misguided? OECD's conclusions do show that our behavior is misguided, but are we willing to investigate the truth or reality of the instruments we use? Even if evidence shows otherwise, are we willing to admit that we are using the wrong instrument of sense perception? Indian knowledge systems helps all explore reality relying on their experience. To seek this experience, the investigation of Indian knowledge system goes to the source of sense perception as the source of knowledge. Perception introspection. Can the quality issue in the knowledge system today be analyzed using Stanford's 4 sources of knowledge? The 2008 crisis caused a change in the first source of knowledge, that is perception. Society earlier perceived that it was safe as graduates from the world's best universities were in key decision-making roles. After the crisis, this perception changed. They now felt that the crisis was aggravated by their behavior. This led to a question: what was wrong in their education that led them to sacrifice society's interests for their own petty gains? Academia now sought knowledge through another source: introspection. Were the four sources enough for it? Do we see facts just as we want to see them? Are preconceived notions, biases, predisposition, etc. a basis for perception? The problem may be more serious than of stating that the glass of water is half full or half empty. In the years preceding 2008, all asset classes were rising in value simultaneously. Economists could not explain it, so they called it Goldilocks growth. Did a faulty perception of the impending crisis transform perception? What impact did it have on the other sources of knowledge? This second source of knowledge emerged from the first. Introspection after perception reality gap of 2008 is viewed here. So let's look at the source of knowledge. 2008 led to introspection, which impacted reason and testimony. There is a lot of evidence of this in literature. A prominent article in Harvard Business Review in March 2009 carried an introspective headline, and I quote, "Are business schools to blame?" unquote. It boldly stated the problem, and I quote, "The economic crisis in the United States has claimed many casualties, some human, some institutional. Among the latter, business schools are among the most battered today. How could MBAs have been involved in activities that caused so much damage to the economy and society?" people ask. The author was then the dean of a university, former dean of the Yale School of Management, formerly a professor at Harvard Business School and the Stanford Graduate School of Business. The article uses reason and testimony to address the memory of pain in society. It states that, and I quote, "Business schools must also accept responsibility for the harm their graduates do, express disapproval, and make curriculum changes that will reduce the likelihood that future graduates repeat those behaviors. However, there appears to be little movement in that direction yet," unquote. The article concluded, and I quote, "Finally, business schools must demonstrate a greater affinity with society's interests. Until business schools make such public gestures of disapproval, society will never fully trust the MBA again," unquote. A professor of Temple University, along with a professor of John Carroll University, wrote in another article, I quote, "In discussing the $1 trillion bailout of the US financial institutions, virtually every member of Congress, including Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke and President Obama, has blamed the crisis on the greed and irresponsibility of Wall Street. Almost all of the financial executives involved in the crisis, from CEOs to middle managers, are products of our business schools. Additionally, there is a high correlation between the recent unethical behavior of a number of multinational corporations and the number of MBA holders in their top ranks," unquote. The article's abstract criticizes the curriculum, and I quote, "These theories include determinism and materialism, the cult of profit maximization, and a pessimistic view of human nature as totally self-interested. By teaching these theories, business schools are inculcating values of materialism and greed that create a lifelong pursuit of money and status. Further, these materialistic values create higher levels of depression, anxiety, and psychological disorders, as well as make our students less cooperative and more antisocial as individuals," unquote. Let's look at memory. Did the fading memory of 2008's introspection impact reason? Has testimony of global growth after 2008 changed perceptions once again? Some wonder if the third source of knowledge, memory, has been misused, leading to no significant overhaul. Is human memory very short? Did lack of long-term memory prevent the drastic change originally desired? Others may wonder if we have misuse the fourth source of knowledge, that is reason. We know that it is independent of experience. Which experience have we forgotten? Is it the experience of those who suffered in 2008? Have we used reason that we are back to economic growth to justify a lack of drastic change? Some may argue that the fourth source of knowledge, that is testimony, does not support the argument for a change. The testimony of global growth after 2008, even though it may be due to bailouts, is enough for them. The significant change in perception about knowledge system in 2008 led to introspection, influenced by memory of those who suffered. It sought to use reason based on the testimony of social pain that was created. A media organization carried a story in 2009 with an introspective title, and I quote, "Business schools mull over blame in financial crisis," unquote. It stated that, and I quote, "The schools had critics before the economic crisis cost millions of Americans their jobs and their retirement savings. Now the critics are louder and the questions they raise are being taken more seriously," unquote. It quotes the then dean of the Harvard Business School, and I quote, "This is a time of great introspection for this institution," unquote. It quotes another professor who later became dean of Harvard later as saying, and I quote, "The basic model, the fundamental model, which really made up the fabric of contemporary business education, has to be revisited," unquote. It quotes him as saying that business schools have drifted away from their original mission to create a true management professional for the benefit of society. He says students need to emerge from business schools with, and I quote, "a different mindset," unquote. He goes on to say, and I quote, "One of the most important things would be, I will create value rather than extract value." They have to start seeing that giving back to society in the course of business is possible when one conducts oneself along the lines of a professional business ethos, unquote. The professor said at that time that business schools have yet to agree on a shared philosophy or on a shared body of knowledge and values. Will it require a new education system? The curriculum design of current education system, we discover later, gives both knowledge and a curriculum that should emerge from values. But the values didn't show in actions in 2008. The approach of current knowledge system and Indian knowledge system is different. The current knowledge system finds the reality to be of common atoms binding us. It seeks international mindedness. Why is its education not able to achieve it? Its four sources of knowledge begin with perception and its way of knowing with sense perception. Both are unable to see the reality and deny it. If reality is denied at the beginning, can it be achieved as a goal? The testimony of others use the same language as sense perception. This denial of quantum reality impact the ways of knowing of reason, memory and emotion, deeply impacting imagination and faith. Progress comes with use of imagination. This also impacts sources of knowledge, of memory and reason. Finally, introspection and intuition, if based on denial of quantum reality, are not delivering well-being. Is this due to our first sources of knowledge and way of knowing being unreliable instruments? Faulty testimony, lack of introspection lead to wrong perception, a short memory, and sacrifice of reason. Right actions reveal tacit knowledge. Seeing the snake in the darkness as a rope is an example given in Indian knowledge systems. Sense perception is faulty because of darkness, no other inadequacy. A knowledge system, according to Indian knowledge systems, should give the light so that the sense perception can distinguish between a snake and a rope. What switches on the light of intellect to remove darkness of ignorance? Science in Indian knowledge systems and current knowledge systems agree on the starting point, that atoms are a common building block of our universe. They have a similar conclusion. Current knowledge systems wants international mindedness. Indian knowledge system seeks oneness of humanity. Can we use both to achieve the new global goal of education? This course uses the evidence that uses both current knowledge system and Indian knowledge system, avoiding pitfalls of current knowledge system, ways of knowing and sources of knowledge. We have a new global goal of education. What is well-being that OECD expects from the current knowledge systems? Harvard School of Public Health had a Center for Health and Happiness. While discussing World Health Organization's definition of health that includes well-being, it says, and I quote, "Well-being is a broad construct that encompasses multiple dimensions which can essentially be divided into two large domains, objective and subjective well-being. As a result, various scales and indices have been developed to measure both domains." Unquote. Are these measures enough? How to measure that which is subtle, not easy to measure? For that, will the sources of knowledge and ways of knowing have to start in a different way? If students are given graduation certificates with little or no regard to their character, is society safe? Are corporates they join not vulnerable to another 2008? First, clarity on what creates well-being is needed. A human flourishing study is being done to determine the well-being criteria. Baylor and Harvard universities with Gallup wish to identify determinants that impact overall well-being. They are questioning 240,000 people in 22 countries. A grant of 43.4 million funds a study that selects from a sample of countries representing the diversity of the world's population in terms of geography, religion, culture, and levels of economic development. To quote, I quote, "The study will examine questions such as what does it mean to live well? What's key to being truly healthy and what makes people happy? It will take a close look at the relationship between well-being and major religious traditions." Unquote. I quote again, 6 key domains will be assessed. 1. Mental and physical health. 2. Meaning and purpose. 3. Character and virtue. 4. Close social relationships. 5. Financial and material stability. 6. Happiness and life satisfaction. In probably the largest in the world, the question relating to the gross material aspect of financial and material stability is number 5 in its 6 domains. The importance of the subtle over the gross in the new goal of education should be clear. The current knowledge system focus on the gross aspect of marks or grade is being questioned. This reflects in actions of graduating students who maximize short-term gains or quarterly profits. Such an approach led to the 2008 recession. Seeing the importance given to the subtle in the research, will current knowledge systems consider Indian knowledge systems focus on the subtle to achieve well-being? The new subtle areas of curriculum, attitude and values will now determine how knowledge is absorbed and skill applied. In its Conceptual Learning Framework for Attitude and Values 2030, OECD's Future of Education and Skills report says, and I quote, "Attitudes and values are increasingly integrated into curriculum frameworks, an acknowledgement that competencies require more than knowledge and skills." Unquote. Indian knowledge system addresses the areas wider than knowledge, the area of wisdom. Wisdom is subtle, while knowledge can be found in a textbook. Wisdom may not be easily found in words. Can we search for such wisdom from different sources like Indian knowledge systems? The report states, and I quote, "A diverse range of education systems are pursuing integrated approaches to developing values and attitudes, often drawing on cultural and societal traditions while addressing global challenges." Unquote. Finally, the report concludes, and I quote, recent trends in technology have put ethics high on the education agenda, unquote. The report clarifies, and I quote, depending on social and cultural contexts, different terms may be used instead of attitudes and values, unquote. These terms include ethics, it says, and I quote, ethics and morality are terms related to values and behavior, such as trustworthiness, honesty, loyalty, or fairness, unquote. If Indian knowledge systems gives evidence of these values, can it be considered as an alternative? Another report of OECD quotes the Financial Times, and I quote, the risk is that the education system will be churning out humans who are no more than second-rate computers. So if the focus of education continues to be on transferring explicit knowledge across generations, we will be in trouble, unquote. We have already discussed the importance of implicit knowledge that the study of the subtle gives. The report finds two questions important. I quote, 1. What knowledge, skills, attitudes and values will today's students need to thrive and shape their world? And 2. How can instructional systems develop these knowledge, skills, attitudes and values effectively? Unquote. This course seeks to answer these two questions with evidence of both over 4 decades. The report uses a quotation, and I quote, we need to replace old education standards still in general use with an educational framework that combines the acquisition of traditional knowledge with the 21st century skills of creativity, critical thinking, communication and collaboration. We will need to teach both skills and character in addition to knowledge, with a focus on metacognition, which includes learning how to learn. Precisely because we cannot predict what technologies will be ascendant in the future, we have to teach ourselves and our children to be versatile, unquote. This course seeks to answer these two questions with evidence of both over 4 decades. Subtle values are the basis of curriculum design in the Indian knowledge system. How was the use of values incorporated in the current knowledge system? Their effort in current knowledge system was to create, and I quote, an education for life, a responsible life open to the problems of our world and encouraging students to give time and energy to bring about change, unquote. Ian Hill writes about IB curriculum in almost the same words that OECD 2030 document states, and I quote, we are concerned then with forming attitudes and values. IB students give much time to world issues, to the environment, to poverty and other human problems. This is not only due to the general global approach of the curriculum, but above all to the requirement of ongoing social service among the community, which is considered as important for the development of students as academic studies. In short, it is an education for life, a responsible life open to the problems of our world and encouraging students to give time and energy to bring about change, unquote. It believes in and proves Indian knowledge systems and OECD's hypothesis, even before we start, about the role of values in education. And I quote, values are learnt, not inherited. Education, therefore, performs a fundamental role as one of the factors which shapes values, unquote. The OECD report also states other subtle things. It states, and I quote, personal, social, societal and human attitudes and values can be incorporated into curricula using a variety of terms. The term attitudes and values does not exclude other terms, unquote. All these things are subtle. It defines, the OECD report defines values to include, and I quote, human dignity, respect, equality, justice, responsibility, global mindedness, cultural diversity, freedom, tolerance and democracy, unquote. It says, and I quote, not all values derive from ethics and morals, unquote. It says, not all values derive from ethics and morals, unquote. A relevant question, are these values missing in our curriculum? If not, why couldn't they transform attitudes till now? And an irrelevant question, if OECD seeks values and I quote, not all values derive from ethics and morals, unquote, then does it use immoral or unethical values? Questions in Indian knowledge system are asked only with an intention to add value. such a question will never be asked in the Indian knowledge system. So, is well-being subtle? Can it be fully measurable? About the Baylor-Harvard Gallup study, the project director states that, and I quote, "The study is exactly the type of work needed to deeply understand the interplay of key elements in human experience that help us live well, be happy, and experience a sense of meaning and purpose," unquote. The measurement of well-being is now in the domain of human experience, a subtle variable away from the gross dimensions that measured prosperity. The measurement of prosperity till now was a mathematical entity. One example is the GDP, the gross domestic product. It measures a nation's economic activity. But well-being has subjective components, which by definition are difficult to quantify. What is the knowledge that is beyond numbers? Indian knowledge system explores that. Hence, there is a case for considering Indian knowledge systems to meet the well-being goal of education. How to study that which is subtle and cannot be quantified? Have our sources of knowledge or ways of knowing concentrated on it? Is well-being about the individual and society being in a state of dynamic balance? Is it a subtle state? A relevant question: why study present knowledge system in a course on Indian knowledge systems? The need to study it must be clear to all. It must be clear to all why we are studying Indian knowledge systems. What is the need for it today? The efficacy of anything is determined by comparison. Day gets its relevance when compared to the night, etc. Therefore, to demonstrate the efficacy of Indian knowledge system, we study challenges to the present one. This presentation explores if ethics has already been incorporated in the knowledge system of the world. If it has, then it has been unable to change the values and attitudes that shape application of knowledge and the use of skills. If that be so, there is a case for considering an alternative knowledge system. Which of the knowledge systems available in many cultures should we consider and choose from? This presentation looks at education and knowledge system of India, whose essence and societal tradition is engraved on the entrance hall of its parliament. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that is, the world is one family. It will later present that this approach created economic progress and well-being for thousands of years. When its ideas were implemented in a microcosm of society for 4 decades, we provide evidence of such well-being. We will conclude that the first requirement of this course, Speak the Truth, differentiates it from the present knowledge system. While the present system focuses on converting theory to practice, ancient Indian knowledge systems did the opposite. They converted individual practices of good conduct as the basis of using theory in life. This course lays a deep emphasis on practice. Every attempt is made to make all the lectures very short. A 5-minute slot at the end of this lecture is being given for silent sitting. This is to enable the participant to mull over what is said. Whatever has been heard should be repeated in the mind so that it gets absorbed. Just as sugar is stirred in a cup of tea or coffee with a spoon, use the spoon of silence to stir the sugar of Indian knowledge systems in your mind. It takes some time for the tea or coffee to become sweet. Patience is very important. The perspectives shared in the course will seem meaningful only if such silent sitting is done to mull over what has been said. Else, the half an hour spent in delivering the lectures will be a waste of time. We welcome you to undertake an inner journey during these 5 minutes. Only then will knowledge that is outside you will become wisdom inside you. The time allocated for this is actually 20 minutes, not 5 minutes. The time should be increased gradually. This is also a time for the mind to take rest. In case it cannot do that, mull over whether the voice of the conscience has guided you at any time in life till now. We accept challenges for the physical body in games. In a gym, we can have a 20 minutes plank challenge. We may exchange challenges on the quantity of food we can eat. Can we go beyond such challenges to the second step of the Indian knowledge systems? Can we see if the mind itself can take rest and maybe stop working? Can we explore what will happen if it becomes zero? Remember, it is not good to challenge the mind. It rebels and makes you do the opposite of what you want it to do. It is far simpler to observe the mind. For doing this, first the physical body should move as little as possible. Observe the mind as it tells the body to move. You are not telling the body to move, the mind is telling the body to move. Observe the mind. Move away from the mind and see what it is forcing the body to do. Watch the mind as if you are sitting on a fan at a distance. When you are at home, Shavasana in yoga is a good posture for this practice. Try to first silence the body, then the mind. For those who have mastered this, they can try the next method. When you think of nothing, can you experience love without giving it a shape of a thing like your favorite food or a thing that you want to own or the physical form of a person? Can it just be love without an emotion to a person or a thing? Can it be love for the sake of love? How do you experience loving yourself? The purpose of this course is to help you discover yourself, that loving being beyond the body and the mind.